gentlemen, let's get into this next story. And again, sorry that this went a little longer. It's probably going to go a little longer than 90 minutes. I don't normally like to make it that way, but I do want to get everyone's point. Now, this story comes the way of WCCFtech.com. It was written by Francisco DeMeo. He goes on to say the lead title is PlayStation will eventually abandon console exclusives and follow Xbox's strategy, according to CEO of Moon Studios. Now, look, I'm going to read directly from the article, folks, and then we're going to get everyone's opinion and we'll get you on out of here. It goes on to say this to open up. Console exclusivity will eventually become a thing of the past for PlayStation, as it has with Xbox, due to how consoles and the market as a whole have changed. This comes the way of Moon Studios CEO. And in a lengthy post on X, Moon Studios CEO Thomas Muller talked about Xbox's current approach, saying that it was the right one for several reasons. A few years back, the studio decided not to make No Rest for the Wicked under Microsoft because it would have been prevented, or Microsoft would have prevented the game from being released on PlayStation consoles and Nintendo Switch as well. And this would, of course, have impacted the game considerably, as the studio felt that multiplayer and cross-play are an important part of the experience. Now, elaborating further, according to the article, on the limitations of console exclusivity, the Moon Studio CEO gives a very interesting example. And this is what they said. Over the years of communicating with Phil Spencer, Thomas Muller always brought up how crazy it would be if certain DVDs would only play on players made by certain manufacturers. If this is crazy for movies, Muller asks, then why is it different for games? Considering how both PlayStation and Xbox consoles are powered by essentially the same hardware and have the same controller. Now, that I would disagree on, because the Xbox Series X controller, especially the Elite, is leaps and bounds ahead of the DualSense, but that is, again, personal choice. But the article goes on to say, Umbra, at the same time, the console's audience hasn't been growing. And for the entire industry to grow, access to content must be easier. This is achieved by reducing the cost of entry, which is what Microsoft is doing with its current strategy. For these reasons, Thomas Muller concludes that he would be surprised if Sony didn't follow Microsoft's strategy and bring an end to the days of PlayStation exclusive releases. Now, look, you and I don't like to really, swim in the slander, waters. But I'm going to tell you this right now. The day that you get God of War on Xbox, all of these, and I'm not going to say the word because I don't like to slander, all of these PlayStation representatives, and I'm being very fair and kind by saying representatives and community members, because they're worse than that, are going to have to go into witness protection, because they have been banging the drum about Xbox dying, going third party, when, in my opinion, folks, the math ain't mathing. Xbox is getting 70%, PlayStation's going to get 30%. Somehow, PlayStation's making more money. Make that make sense? I have no idea, but I do want to get your thoughts. Now, granted, Sony, they are very traditional. And I think that we're going to see this happen probably next year, maybe even sometime this year, where you'll get dual releases on PC. I don't see them putting games on Xbox. I don't see it, but I think they're going to eventually be forced to, because what's happening is PlayStation gamers, and this is not a slander, this is not console war rhetoric, these are facts. Their last couple of exclusives that were done through marketing deals did not fare well for those developers. Just look at what happened with Rise of the Ronin. It only sold 1 million copies on PlayStation 5. It just was announced for PC, and I would imagine at some point come to Xbox.
That's where I'll be getting it.
Right, Stellar Blade is another one. You can't find any story past it sold 1 million copies.
Look, Astrobot.
Right? Astrobot first party.
Yeah.
Game of the year, game of the generation, game of the universe, 1.5 million copies sold. Now, maybe it's at 2 now. Maybe it's gone up a little bit. Awesome, right? But 2 million to 70 million consoles, not good, right? And you also can take into what happened with Square. Final Fantasy Rebirth won all these awards. Everyone that played it absolutely adored it. Think it was the best graphics they've ever done. Great story, phenomenal, title, and it underperformed for Square.
To be fair, though, Square says everything underperforms.
And I mean that is true, but we did find that it sold only a couple of a million, as opposed to it probably should have sold 10 million copies.
I'm just glad that Square is finally learning their lesson. That's what I'm happy about.
So my question to you is, what do you think about Thomas Muller actually putting this out there, where he thinks that Sony is at some point, not tomorrow, not next week, maybe even not next year, but at some point is going to be in a position where, fiscally speaking, it makes more dollars than cents to put PlayStation games on other platforms?
The thing about Thomas Muller is I like how he goes in depth with it, how he explains his view. If you've seen him, he had one with I believe the lady name was what's her name, Alyssa Mercant, the lady like a lot of people hate, and he was misconceptions about Moon Studios, how they ran their businesses behind the scenes. And you all remember that, with like Microsoft couldn't deal with them because of the Boys Club and toxicity, and and then he came out and explained it in such great detail, very calmly, very, very respectfully. So I say all that to kind of say that he goes into his thoughts of whatever he really explains on Twitter with good intent, and I think with a lengthy nuance, if that makes sense. So I don't doubt that he thought this through, and that him having been in the gaming industry as he's been forever, however long, that he sees the writing on the wall, so to speak. I don't know how soon that will be. I stick by the thought that Sony wants to stay in a traditional style of, I guess, sales. The old way of selling hardware, and like that's the biggest thing. See, Microsoft right now is software leading. Sony is hardware leading. Right, and they're going to supplement it with some software here and there. It's the opposite for Microsoft. And Microsoft has learned a lesson that I think right now seems scary and untenable, but I think in the long run is going to pay off for them, rather, right? But there's a cost for that, because now the fanboys are like, "Oh, the console wars are over. They lost. Yay, we won on the hooligan side," right? So that's the thing. But in the long run, Sony just might have to do that. You keep hearing these talks from Sean Layden where he talks about unsustainability. And if Sony's going to continue doing the thing they do, as far as delivering those major AAA, over-the-shoulder, story-based, sad dad walking simulator type games that everybody talks about, and we know how costly those are, hundreds of millions. If they're going to keep doing that, well, they might have to branch out. And I don't know how soon it'll be. I still venture that, PC would be the first place they'll go as far as closer to day and date, if not months apart, than, day and date, right? So I would say it's going to steadily drop from being 1 year to 6 months to 3 months, possibly to day and date. I don't know how long that'll take for them to get to that point. And I don't know what might happen or change in the gaming market that could positively affect them, where they don't have to do that either. Maybe something might change. Maybe, I don't know, Elon Musk buys them and he has all the money in the world, they don't have to do that. You see what I mean? Like, you never know what can happen. But as it stands, with their pockets as it is, and they make as far as what they earn, and they don't have the cash, on deck or whatever that Xbox or Microsoft does, that so like Sony is not as strapped for cash as far as that goes comparatively, or not strapped, that's the wrong word. They're not as stacked with cash, should I say, or flush, should a better word is flush. So that's my thinking. I think a lot of things have to change for them to get into the same style of a model of sales that Microsoft is in now. Microsoft was forced into it because of a lot of different things, but it might pay out for them again in the long run. Sony right now is still doing okay, even though software sales are not showing that, which is kind of crazy because you have so many MAUs and people who have bought the console, and you have single digit, low single digit at that sales, million sales. So it's like it's odd. And these are the same gamers who are telling us we don't buy games. So it's very odd. Again, I don't know how long it'll take, but a lot of the gaming style of gaming has changed for gamers too. So a lot of the cross-platforming style of gaming, a lot of us like that. We like being able to access games all over, and this is where Microsoft is going to excel at because they're already ahead of the game. So that could affect things. A lot of the games are multiplayer focused, where a lot of the younger crowd tends to gravitate to. Right? We got the games and service titles that that everybody keeps going back to, the CODs, the
black hole games,
the black hole games. Yeah. So that's also a thing, and it's less. There people, the casual gamers are much less focused on the story based third person over the shoulder games as we are. We being a hardcore, it just doesn't matter to them the way these games matter to us. So that's another thing. I don't know how that's going to play out. We already know Sony has gotten rid of so many of their gas titles, and wisely, in my opinion, because I think they were all going to flop, and I still believe Fair Games is going to flop too. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I just think it is. So I think it's a possibility. I just don't know how long that might be the case before it happens. That would be the only thing I say. I don't know. We can't say he's wrong because time will have to tell. So I don't know. We'll see.
It's going to be interesting to watch. And again, this is one of those stories I think is going to be evolving as the year continues. Jimmy Moran, let's get your final thoughts on this. Interestingly enough, when they had a dual release with Helldivers 2, they sold 12 million copies. Now, granted, a lot of the sales came the way of Steam, and we did see that it kind of got mucked up a bit with them boxing out 70-plus countries with the whole PSN thing, and they haven't walked that back. So they lost a lot of sales there. But I think if there's something to take away from the success of it, day-and-date releases for their games, especially first-party games that are that they help publish. It's a giant win for Sony because not only do they get some sales on PlayStation, and I don't know how many exactly, but it certainly wasn't as much as PC. PC did numbers for them, and it continues to do numbers. So it makes sense that their next big game, hopefully it's a multiplayer game, it will be dual release. Will that be the same theory and thought for single player? I'm not exactly sure because, again, when they did try to do the single player release via Switch, via Steam, and via PlayStation for Lego Horizon, that did not turn out really good for them. And so again, maybe the wins and the fails will somehow find a happy medium. But my question to you is, what do you think? What are your thoughts on the CEO of Moon Studios thinking that at some point PlayStation is going to adopt the same strategy? Because look, the truth of the matter is that you have Shuhei Yoshida saying that if you want single player games, you got to buy remakes and remasters. You have Sean Layden, former head of PlayStation, going out there saying that gaming has become unsustainable. We have information out there that came the way of the Insomniac leaks that Spider-Man 3 is expected to be upwards of $400 million. They can't afford to do it because that's $400 million before actual advertisement. That is just development. And Spider-Man 2, which was outsold, PS, by the way, by Helldivers 2, which is bonkers to think about, cost $315 million to make. And obviously, all of the cancellations that they've had recently has cost them millions upon millions of dollars. At some point, Sony's going to have to answer to investors. And I think that the way that they do that is to put more games like MLB The Show released on every platform. Now, will that happen for God of War, The Last of Us, or the next Uncharted? I personally, again, with Xbox, I find it weird, and I can't actually, It's going to happen. I just don't know when. What are your thoughts, man?
I mean, the industry is changing. If you go back like 6, 7 years ago, there were people telling me like, "Hey, PlayStation's never going to put games on PC." And then it was, oh, it's going to be 3 years in between releases on PC, and then 1 year, and then 6 months, and then when that Lego Horizon game drops on Switch and PC at the same day, like they are trying. I think there's a few reasons why the Lego Horizon game didn't really sell well. But like their other major titles will. I mean, hell, I'll put it like this: even though Sony didn't publish it, Death Stranding on Xbox sold really well.
It did. It really did. Yeah.
It was number one in most countries on Xbox, and like that's a game where I had the perception of being a FedEx simulator, you know. But yeah, the industry's changing. All these games are costing way too much to make, and like we were talking earlier on the show, like raising the prices of games just won't work. So like, where do they go from here? They try and work out other ways to get money, revenue from these games. You put them on more platforms. Look at like Helldivers 2 was a huge success, and like it was probably one of the biggest games on Steam when it released, and it was absolutely huge. Even though they had the whole PSN situation, like this if these if these publishers were making the same kind of sales as Nintendo, right? So they had, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe sold like 60 million copies.
Unbelievable.
Sony, Microsoft would not change at all. They would be full on traditional, not even a word of multi-platform. I still think they'd put games on PC, but I think that like they wouldn't even look at other consoles, right? Like Nintendo, they can put out a remake, a 2.5D remake of a 30-year-old game, and it'll sell 30 million copies. Right? Like the amount of money Nintendo makes in those games is insane. Now, Sony games and Microsoft games, they do not make that money. They just don't.
No.
But Microsoft's games tend to cost more. Right? You have super realistic graphics, huge detailed open worlds, and it's like the next Spider-Man game. It's going to cost $400 million? Like, look at The Witcher 4 is apparently going to cost close to $300-400 million. That game has to come out and be a huge success day one. Has to be, and that's why these companies are putting like their games on everywhere. Like the Witcher 4, it's obviously going to be on Xbox, PlayStation, PC, probably Nintendo Switch too, because that's more eyes on these games. That's why a lot of these games are signing up for like different what do you call them, streaming services. It's deals right there for instant cash. I think that the industry's changing. It's scary for a lot of people because it's the only industry for the longest time that stayed the same. Books, movies, TV shows have all slowly changed over the past 30 years. Music changed 20 years ago with iTunes, and we all just kind of got along with it. But with video games, a lot of people just aren't used to like things changing so fast. So like, I don't think PlayStation putting more games on PC day one is actually going to be a big deal, like in a negative way. I think it's going to it's going to be a positive. More people are going to be able to play these games, and like, if someone on PC is a PC gamer, they prefer to play games on PC, they are likely not going to pick up a console just to play one game or two games. So like, I think that's a good thing, bringing these games to PC. I honestly think it will get to a point in the next 2 years where we will see almost every single Sony game day one on PC. Will we see more games on console? On Xbox and Switch from PlayStation? I think we could see things like, live service games. Like, hell, Marathon, even though that is a Bungie title, Marathon's going to be on Xbox.
It is.
People aren't doom and glooming in my feed saying, oh, it's the end of PlayStation because, Marathon's going to be on Xbox. Nobody's doing this. Hell, look at when Lego Horizon came out or announced for Switch, right? Did you see anyone in your feed doom and glooming PlayStation?
No, not one.
And do you know what was announced just a few weeks before that? Indiana Jones for PlayStation.
Yeah.
And it was this Lego Horizon game was third party day one, and Indiana Jones was third party months away on different consoles. And people were acting like it was the end of the world, end of Xbox, right? People just like to pick and choose the battles at this point. All these games are going to be on most devices at some point. People just have to get used to the idea. Like Nintendo's in their own little bubble. They're going to sell the Switch 2. It's going to sell 45 billion, units, and be completely fine. But Nintendo, Xbox and PlayStation, they are changing. Like Sony's getting there slowly. They used to say we are never putting games on PC, and then they start putting games on PC, and then some games day one. MLB The Show's on Xbox. Like Marathon's going to be on Xbox. Lego Horizon on Switch. Like things are changing, whether people want to admit it or not, and it's going to continue to change.
Indeed, it's going to continue to change, and like I said, what we used to know is not going to be the same. Sony is eventually going to realize that they're leaving money on the table, and something I've said this for years. Something like Helldivers 2 is going to eventually launch on Xbox. It just is. It's a live service game. They want to make more money. They're going to launch it there. When it comes there, I'll buy it. Spider-Man 1, 2, and Miles Morales, it's sitting literally on a virtual shelf somewhere doing nothing, making not a single penny for Sony. If they made a triple pack for $70 and they dropped it on Xbox, they'd sell 10 million copies. Because Xbox gamers do, in fact, buy games. Not so much for PlayStation. That's just a fact. I don't have to reiterate the numbers. The numbers say that PlayStation gamers just don't buy as many games. That's a fact. And the reason there's a reason for that. Not because they're cheap. No, their audience is casual, and their audience stays in their lanes of games that they enjoy playing on their PlayStations. Whether that be Apex Legends, whether that be Call of Duty or Warzone or Fortnite. These black hole games, Marvel Rivals, has been a big boost for PlayStation numbers in regards to players. These are all free-to-play games. Most of the audience for PlayStation are not hardcore. 85%+ on console are casual gamers, ladies and gentlemen, especially on PlayStation, because it's the most popular system. It's the most popular console.